Hello, welcome back, and sorry it's been a while. I have had quite a lot of trouble recording this. Putting aside the many false starts at even doing this episode at all, today I've had about 2 hours of recording problems, and I think I fixed the severe one that was causing stuttering, so hopefully we won't have that, but as a consequence, we've lost my cursor, so... Or at least we had in my test. I'm seeing it in the preview now, so maybe you will see my cursor, but anyway. If you can't, I'm sorry, I just can't fix it. Hopefully, even if the cursor's missing, you'll see the yellow highlight, and I'll just try and be more specific in what I'm describing. So, yeah, I've done some research. Since we're getting close to the end of this, I want it to be about 30 episodes, maybe a bit more. I have had to plan out what those episodes are going to be, rather than just sort of winging it. So that's taken a while. And of all the things I want to get done in the last few episodes, I've put in the front the easiest and the highest impact thing. Basically, I want to do something this episode that is relatively easy to do and will have a big impact on the game, make it a lot more fun. And that is adding new enemies. Turns out that makes a big difference. And it's not very difficult to do. It's not very difficult to do, but we do need to do a bit of kind of catch-up work beforehand, because we left our enemy object in a slightly unfortunate state. So we built it the cheap and cheerful way, which is to... it's just one object. So the Capsule Collider, its visible... what do you call it? Mesh... are all on the same object, which is unfortunate because it means, for example, if we change the height of this, which we might want to do for making different enemy types, we've also got to change its position so that it still lines up with the ground. And that's terrible. You never want to have to do that, because its position will affect things like when it comes out of an enemy spawner. Like, the enemy spawner wants to spawn all enemies in the same place. If each enemy has to be placed like a custom height so that its bottom will touch the ground, that's going to be an absolute nightmare. So we don't want to do that. That means we've got to separate out the sort of physicality of this thing from the parent object, which is the enemy thing. And the way I start doing this is just to click on it in the hierarchy, then do Control-C, Control-V, and that pastes it. And because we're sort of editing a prefab, it's pasted it as a child of the prefab. So you've got a weird thing where it's now its own child. Don't want to dig into the psychology of it. And we're going to delete all of the components on the parent object that are to do with its visual physicality. So capsule mesh filter, I don't really know what a mesh filter is, but we don't need it. Mesh renderer, that's what lets you see it, we don't want that. And capsule collider, we don't want that. We'll leave the behavior on here, we'll leave the rigid body on here, and the nav mesh agent. Those are all things that that kind of govern the whole object, the whole entity. And you can imagine we might have a much more complex enemy with many different many different colliders on it, arms and legs and things. You wouldn't normally build like a humanoid enemy like that, but if we wanted to build like a tank, it's quite possible to have like a chassis object and a turret object and all that stuff. You still only have one rigid body for all of that, then it's on the parent object, and all the colliders will be sort of factored into that when Unity's figuring out how it should behave. So let's call the child object body. And now we're going to remove everything we didn't remove from the parent. So get rid of the behavior, we don't want the body to have its own behavior. Get rid of the rigid body, we've already got one on the parent object. Get rid of the health system, get rid of the nav mesh agent, and that's it. I guess that... Okay, this already got rid of the material. I didn't manually remove that, but it did it. So the solving looks exactly the same, which is what we want, because we're not trying to change this enemy yet. But there's one little gotcha that I noticed when I was going through this. In nav mesh agent, we gave it an offset. You know what, I'm going to come back to that. Let's see if that is a problem. If we find our enemies are floating, that's what we'll go back and fix. But sometimes it's better to actually show you the problem before fixing it. And also, when I found that problem in practice, it turned out I also had 3 other problems going on, so it may not have been that was causing the issue. Right, so the last thing I want to fix here is I don't want the scale to be in the parent object, because the scale we were fine-tuning the visual appearance of this thing. And we're going to do that differently for each kind of enemy. Each kind of enemy is going to be a variant of this prefab, and I want the parent object to be as similar as possible in all cases. So I just want to be changing stats here. I don't want to be fine-tuning the scale in here. The body should have the scale on it. So what I'm going to do is I want all those specific values in the body, Actually, first I'm going to reset the position because there's no, it's irrelevant to have a prefab with a position built into it, because that won't affect, if you spawn it at 0, 0, 0 in the world, it'll appear at 0, 0 in the world no matter what the prefab's positions are set to, so that's a waste of time. And that also means now I can just copy component here, then go to the body and paste it, and the first thing that's going to happen is it's going to get too small because because it's applying those scale values twice now, right? The whole thing is small, and then the thing within it is small within that. I've probably said this before, but scale here is relative to the parent. So what we really want is for that to have all the fine-tuned details, and this can just be reset now. And now we end up with the same overall size. So slightly weird to get your head around that, but now we have a much better structure for these. So now, I want to do this now because after we duplicate it 3 times, we don't want to be messing with the fundamental structure of where the components are after we already have 3 copies of this thing. That gets to be a pain. So let's just play the game and see what breaks. It's my philosophy in general. I will just fire. Okay, they're popping out, look alright. Looks to me like they're hovering. Looks like they're off the ground. And there could be several reasons for that. So, yeah, they're hovering. So, I'm still not going to fix the navigation thing, because the more I think about it, the less sure I am that that's actually a problem. Basically, I don't remember ever setting that to a custom value. And so maybe I never did. Maybe that's the default. Oh, I could check guards, couldn't I? Guards have a navigation. If you don't know what I'm talking about. Oh, it does have a base offset. Interesting. Interesting. So we may end up resetting that. But one obvious problem is that enemy spawners, we created this spawn point, which is this invisible object that defines where an enemy appears. That just sort of happened to work out well. I guess kind of happened to work out in the sense that it is off the ground, and our enemy's center was also off the ground, and the amounts were not too out of whack that we saw any actual bad behavior from it, but we still don't want that to be the case. So, we just want the spawn point to be on the ground, and so in this case we will compensate for the height. No, let me think. Let me think. Alright, so if we really wanted to apply this principle throughout the whole game, we would go through and reposition every enemy spawner, because we made these, we positioned these with the middle of the object being the middle of the object, not the ground. But the easier way for us to do this, because it doesn't really matter, it's not going to cause us any headaches, famous last words, is I'm just going to, this 1.23 is how far off the ground we made it when we built it. And I know I just said that these values don't get used. That's true, but I think the reason they are set this way is because that's how high off the ground it was when we made the prefab, and so that tells us how high off the ground the center is, which tells us how to put the spawn point on the ground, which is just to do minus that. So don't worry if you didn't understand that. This is a very particular problem that stems from how we built this object in the first place, and it's not really important if you didn't grasp it, because hopefully problems like this are not going to be that common, particularly if you stick to the rule of creating an empty game object that is at ground level as the parent of all your entities. Okay, so back to our enemy. Let's see if that fixed it. We probably are going to change that nav mesh agent figure. Sometimes game development is about stubbornly refusing to learn something, and I refuse to learn what that value means and whether I set it. Sorry about the sirens. It's Vancouver. Okay, so yeah, they are still off the ground. So let's just try base offset. So I think that what that means is it's telling it's telling the nav mesh agent, which is sort of the AI for pathfinding, it's saying, hey, by all means walk around the ground, but just know you should be 1 unit off the ground. And actually that's no longer true for us. Let me see though, it looks like now it looks like we're going to be in the ground. So we may need to lift up the body. Yes, we will need to lift up the body. So I'll do that now. So it's, I'm gonna, okay, so what we could do is try and, the obvious thing to do is put it at 0.39 or whatever, or half that. Actually, 0.39 I think is going to work out perfectly. We could copy this value and paste it in there. Or more sensibly, we should just make this 0.4. So, because there's no reason it should be this really specific figure. But is that at ground level? I guess this grid is at ground level, but it's really hard to tell, isn't it? Like, I seem to be... It looks like I'm way off the ground, and then when I go a little bit down, I'm through it somehow. I don't want to trust that grid. I can't really... It's a 3D thing being seen from 2D, and it's hard to judge that. When we click on this, actually, I think we're seeing the base there. But the way to be sure, the thing I always do just to test stuff is create a cube, make it really small. You don't need to do this. It's just a thing you can know, a trick you can know about for future reference. And that is centered at the actual origin of the object. So we verified the origin of the object is now the bottom. If, when I was messing around with this, the reason it's 0.4 is kind of complicated because normally you'd expect it to be half, right? If a thing is too tall, you want its center is 1 off the ground, not 2 off the ground. But a capsule is a special kind of thing where it's twice as high as a cube would be for the same scale, and so the half cancels out the double. I don't know why I'm explaining this. This only adds to the confusion. Again, don't worry about if you don't follow that. What I was going to say actually is that let's say that these figures didn't work out so nicely and we didn't really know what the scale is. After I've made that cube, I know I just need to drag this until it's sitting so that the bottom of it is in the middle of the cube. And in fact, that looks not quite high enough. And yeah, that gets us to 0.398, so I was right with my 0.4. Cool. Did I change the nav mesh thing? I said I would. Yes. So now let's see some enemies come out of a spawner, preferably not that one. Please be on the ground this time. They're actually not quite on the ground, are they? Why aren't they quite on the ground? To be honest, that's close enough. We don't need them to literally be touching it, and there could even be friction issues if they do. I don't know. But the main thing I notice here is that I've left that cube visible. If I do this, we could just delete that, but actually I like to just disable it so that we know so that we have a future reference if we need it again. My best guess is that the enemy spawner positioning is the reason they're slightly hovering now, but I'm not going to worry about it. So, we've now made one enemy that pretty much works. I'm afraid actually that we still probably have another problem, and let me check. I think we're going to have some problems with them taking damage. This is sometimes called technical debt, where you've done things the cheap and cheerful way. And that's fine, isn't it? Okay, we don't have a problem. I'm surprised we don't have a problem, but we don't. I also want to check a couple of things. So when I take bullets, I die, and when I hit those guys, I die. Okay, we have no damage problems. I'll just make a mental note to return to this if we need to. Maybe we'll make the change anyway. Yeah. I'm just going to tell you about this change because I just think it's a useful tip to know. The issue I hit in testing, which I don't seem to be hitting here, is that now that the collider is on the child object and not on the parent object, bullets were failing to hit enemies, and my solution was... Actually, sorry, it's bullet. I'm typing in the wrong place now. Bullet behavior. There's this line of code here where when we collide with something, we look for their health system. Do they have a health system component? And if so, we damage it. If they don't have a health system, we do nothing. What I changed, and I think we should do this anyway, just for sort of security or future-proofing. Rather than get component, we say get component in parent. And that will find it both if it's in its parent, or if it's on the object itself, or if it's in its parent's parent. It just keeps looking till it finds it. So that's a useful thing to know in general. And it seems like we don't have that problem, so I might be misinterpreting whatever bug I was seeing in practice, but I think that code is just better. I think we should do that in general. You don't want to make too many assumptions about how that object is, what its hierarchy is like. If there's a health system anywhere on this thing, we want to damage it. Okay, so now that we've done that, I think we can just start making enemy types. First thing I'm going to do is rename the enemy to Swarmer, because that's already what we call it in code. I'm also going to make an enemies folder, just so that you can see these things by themselves. I'll make a weapons folder too while I'm at it, and we'll move weapons into there later. So what's going to go in the enemies folder? It's going to be the guard and the swarmer. And to make the new swarmer, I'm actually not going to duplicate it because I want to make a variant, don't I? So I'm just going to drag it into a scene first. A bit weird I'm putting it in a startup scene because the startup scene is not where anything should really go, but it's not going to stay there. I just want to change it in a couple of ways. I want to call it a fast swarmer. This is the quick fun bit where you just get to change stats. This is what designers get to do all day. Is just plug in new numbers and see how it feels. So speed 2, let's say speed 5. And health 2, let's say health 1. So they're going to be fast and weak. And now I'm going to drag that back into our enemies folder, and it's going to ask me if I want to make a variant, and I do. I want to make it a variant so that if we ever change the swarmer in general, it will apply to the variants as well. Just going to call it fast swarmer. And delete it from here. Otherwise it will be a persistent enemy that follows you around from level to level. And is there anything else I need to do? Yes. The last thing we need to do, I won't see this in game unless an enemy spawner spawns it. So I will click on this. Right now its enemy prefab is hard coded to be swarmer. Obviously we're going to have to change that at some point if we want to spawn different enemies all from the same kind of enemy spawner. And so for now I'm just going to drag in fast swarmer to there, so they'll all spawn fast swarmers, and that way we can just see whether fast swarmers even work. So I don't want to die to the guard, really. There are loads of railguns on this level. Actually, railgun's good for guards. Okay, yeah, they're fast. Yep, they're fast. And do they die in one hit? Yep. No health bars here. Oh, I like that. It's got much more of a panicky feeling now. Awesome. Okay, we've made our fast swarmer. It doesn't look any different at the moment, so let's make it look different. And the first part of that is to change the material. You might have seen me use some shortcuts here that I haven't been using the entire series, or indeed in the last 10 years of using Unity, but these little saved searches up here are actually really useful. I just kind of mentally blocked them out. I knew they were there once upon a time, and I think I've used them long ago, but I haven't been using them. And for finding materials, this is great. I just click a button that says all materials, and it finds all the materials. And the standard enemy material, I'm just going to duplicate that, and I'm going to rename it to fast swarmer material. And I'm just going to change the color. So I thought the color of speed is pink. That's my claim. I'm going to make it a sort of quite tasteful lavenderish pink. Remember that they're metallic, so this is going to have quite a bold look to it, I think. And it's the body that we want to change the material on, obviously. And it always looks really dark right after you first make it. That won't last. Ooh, that's lovely. I like it. And then because, yeah, the whole point of making this body separate is so that now we can resize it. And I want it to be... you know, this whole thing is just an object. And I think I want to change the object. I think I'm going to make it a sphere. And I'll leave the old body where it is for now, because what I want to do is make sure that the scale is in line. So I'll make this one purple. And then, so what you often want to do is resize a thing, but you want to keep the base where it is. And this tool it's for resizing rectangles, but actually it works on 3D objects too, and that means when you drag one dimension of it, it keeps the other one where it is. So that's really good for height. For width, I think I'm going to use these handles, because I want it to stay centered width-wise, don't I? And in fact, why am I even doing this? Why don't I just type in the values? Let's just do 0.6, 0.6, 0.6. Yeah, so that is going to be smaller than it was. I do need to drag it down. Let's turn that cube back on so we can see what we're doing. And I'm going to turn the old body off. And yeah, they're just going to be little balls like that. And then I can just delete that, I believe. No, I can't delete that. Okay, but I can disable it. Okay, let's disable the cube again and just see how that looks. Because once multiple different types are in the same level, it's going to become essential that they are different. I fit an area here that says serialized target has been destroyed. That happens if you have a prefab open when you click play, and you can just ignore it. You can just unpause. Purple orbs. Oh, they're great. They actually, it really emphasizes, oh my god. It really emphasizes their flowiness, so they look more like a fluid somehow. So I'm happy with that. Now, we'll create another prefab for a tough enemy, and I don't want that to be a variant of the fast one, I want it to be a variant of the main one. So again, I'll drag the Swarmer into this scene. I will give it a speed of 1, it's going to be slower, and it's going to be really tough. I'm going to give it a health of 7. And I'm going to have to rename it anyway after I make the variant, so I'll make the variant and then rename it here. Tough Swarmer. My idea is that we'll do these types, and then afterwards we might have like a super fast Swarmer and a super tough Swarmer, and maybe like a sort of level 2 Swarmer that's as fast as the level 1 fast one and as tough as the level 1 tough one. Something like that. So then I delete that from the scene, don't need it there anymore. Open up this, and this time I might keep it as a capsule. I'm going to make a new material for it, duplicating the enemy material, calling it Tough Swarmer material. And the colour, I think for something that's tough, should be a kind of blue-grey. I use blue-grey a lot, don't I? But this is going to be metallic blue-grey, so I think it'll still stand out. And something like that feels like the colour of armour to me. That's a question we all have to answer for ourselves. What is the true colour of armour? And the body, I want it to be, let's use the rectangular thing, quite squat, but then quite wide. So, like that kind of thing. And I'll just make sure, oh, that's close to 1, so I think I'll make it just 1 in both X and Z dimensions. And let's actually put the material on. Here. Yeah, that's quite nice. They could actually be a bit less saturated, I think. I suppose being more saturated... let's just see how that looks. So again, we're going to have to temporarily just double-click the enemy spawner, and you'll notice I'm using, there's the all prefabs link here. I had to... Yeah, for whatever reason, when I first looked at this, I was seeing some garbage in this folder, and I clicked the In Assets button that just filters it down to just the stuff we made, I think. I can't at a glance tell you what just disappeared when I clicked that, but something did. And if you're seeing a lot of junk in your folder, then In Assets is the thing to click. And instead of Fast Swarmer, we want Tough Swarmer. So yeah, this is the fast, fun part of game development, is when you get to just design some stuff and just plug some numbers in and see how it feels. So, oh, gotta get a... Wow. Railgun does a lot of damage. I will try for these guys and just watch them. They can soak up a lot of Uzi fire, which is actually to my advantage. And they really are slow. One balance change I'm going to make at some point is to make those guards less extreme. Yeah, that was my last railgun shot. But that's, right away, the differences in the weapons are becoming really pronounced. Like, railguns are super good for these tough guys. And that's kind of fun. So now we want these to actually show up in the game, and I don't think that we should add a list to the enemy spawner, because I don't think, like, if we do that, then all we can do, if the enemy spawner is the thing that decides what to spawn, then wherever they are, they could spawn any kind of enemy. And if we're planning to have, like, level 2 enemies and all this kind of stuff, that is more of a level generator decision, I would say. The level generator should be in charge of what kind of enemies are going to happen in this level. So let's go to the level generator. Let's, in fact, open the script for level generator. And it already has game object slots for things like what the guard prefab. I am going to make a list. I have not said list there, have I? I've said game object. A list of game objects called enemy types. We could be more specific and say swarmer types to distinguish it from guards. Maybe I'll do that. And that's all I need to do in code. Then when I go back to the editor, I'm going to go to all prefabs and find the level generator. Yeah, it is a prefab. So now there's this list here, but it's got nothing in it. So then we just go to enemies, and you can, if you like, lock this inspector window so that if you accidentally click once, it doesn't take us away from here and ruin our whole plan. Tough Swarmer goes in here. Swarmer goes in here. Fast Swarmer goes in here. Doesn't matter about the order. And then enemy spawner is going to be the thing that needs to reference this. Enemy spawner. Right now it has its own enemy prefab variable. In start, we are going to set what enemy prefab is. We're going to go and get it from the references dot level generator dot swarmer types. But what do we put in here? It's a list. We want to pick something from the list. I want to put in something like random enemy index, the index of a random enemy. But I haven't declared that variable yet. Let's declare it here, and we want it to be a random number within the range from 0 to references.levelgenerator.swarmertypes.count. That is how many are in the list. And just a reminder, when you use random range, there's this little sneaky thing about it that if you say random range from 0 to 1.0, then 1.0 is one of the possible things it will return. But if you give it integers, whole numbers, then it will never return the last value. And that's important here because when you have the count of a list with one object in it, that object has a count of 1, sorry, that list has a count of 1, there's one object in the list, that's intuitive enough, but the index of that single object is 0. So the index that matches the count is never valid. The thing has one list in it, but it has one item in it. I don't know why I'm getting lists and objects mixed up today. The list has one object in it, but if you ask for object number 1, it's going to say, the whole thing's going to crash. It's going to say there isn't one. All it's got is 0. So we never want it to pick count, but that's okay because random range doesn't pick the maximum value when you give it integers, which I think is why it's set up that way. I think it's stupid. I think it should be consistent with how it works for floating point values, the decimal type ones, but it isn't, so let's live with it. So that is going to set our enemy prefab to a random item in this list. And that is done, that will work, but let's do something else here because we've left it in a slightly confusing place for, if you're working on a team, this would be more of a problem, but also if you're working with yourself and you're forgetful, like me, you could get messed up later by clicking on the enemy spawner and seeing that it has a slot here for what kind of enemy it's going to spawn. It looks like that's a thing we can set and that would be meaningful for us to set, but actually it's going to do nothing. It's going to get overridden in code. And so we've kind of left a little trap for ourselves to think, oh, I want to spawn this kind of enemy. I'll plug it into this thing, run the game, and something else comes out. So I'm just going to... we still need the enemy prefab variable because we want to set it on start and then remember it every time we spawn one. We're going to spawn lots of them. But it doesn't need to be public anymore. We don't see it in the inspector, so I'm just going to delete the word public. So that's the kind of thing that like a more professional programmer would be doing a lot is tightening up the security on your variables. If it's not supposed to be set outside of this class, then it can't be set outside of this class. I'm pretty lax about it because I think the work it involves to ensure everything is as restrictive as possible is disproportionate with the amount of work, with the amount of lost time of actual confusion over this, especially if you're working on your own. But in that particular case, I feel like it's worth it. So it's disappeared there, so now we can't be confused about that. So hopefully, if I just play the game now, we should get all 3 enemy types spawning randomly. Always a bit tricky to test random stuff, because of course if it spawns all the standard ones, we won't know whether it's working or not. But no, we got fast and we got tough. Look at that. I love the way they look, actually. Wow, they just got annihilated by a guard. And here comes some more fast ones. I'm going to hide behind the tough ones as like a shield. That actually works really well. And they got obliterated. This is... Oh, the shadows are really cool as they go through the guards' lights. You know what's going to happen is I'm going to take out these guys, no problem, and I'm not going to have ammo. Oh my god. There's also a bunch of standard ones, where we've thoroughly proved that it works. One thing that's occurring to me is, in our level generator, do we specify how many spawners? We do. What is it set to for scene 2? Because that seemed like a lot to me. But I guess I've just made 2 harder types, so it's not that surprising that the level was harder. It's going to spawn 4. Okay, yeah, I think we did see 4. I think we had 2 fast ones, 1 tough one, and 1 standard. And that makes the game harder. So right now we've got 3 enemy types, 2 of which are arguably tougher. Actually, I think fast and regular are probably about the same, because fast take half as much ammo to get rid of. But tough ones are just straight up nastier, because ammo is a real problem at the moment. I'm not going to worry about balancing that right now. That is us done for the enemy types, but there's a couple other things I want to do this episode, if I've got time. And yeah, we're in at half an hour, great. Oh, that's good. Actually very good, because there's several other things I want to do. We have a few field problems, in my opinion, and I'll show you what I mean. Is that just the... Oh, no. That's an actual problem. Oh, sorry, I'm launching level 2. I should be launching startup. So if I walk up against a wall and I rotate, I am bumping against myself and everything else, and it's real awkward. And sometimes you sort of, the camera judder there is horrible. It just doesn't feel very good. And so we're going to do what almost all games do, which is change the collider of the player to be smaller than and rounder than their real shape. That's what most games do, because it makes movement a lot smoother. So our player looks like a cube, but we don't actually want them to behave like a cube, I don't think. And in doing so, we're going to fix the long-standing niggle at the heart of our game, which is we also didn't make the player in the good way, with the empty game object at 0 and then putting stuff on top of it. I may never know whether... Oh, interesting. Huh. I may never know whether it was the right call to teach you the cheap and cheerful way and then go back and correct it. That made sense to me at the time. I knew we would end up going back and correcting a lot of these things, but some of them you never have to. And like things like the geometry of our levels, like the big chunks of floor and stuff, it's not worth doing it for that. But it probably would have been a good idea to do it for the player. And so we're going to do it now. So I just did my Control-C, Control-V strategy, and it didn't go as a child of the player, it went somewhere else, but I don't really care, I'm just going to drag it in. So we're doing the same trick we do with the enemies, where I want to delete all the physical properties of the parent object, mesh renderer, mesh filter, box collider, but leave all the behaviors in the rigid body. And then this, we'll call it the body. This is going to retain all the visual stuff, but this time, let's remove all the behaviors and the rigid body. But this time, I am also going to remove the collider, because I don't want collision to be square. I want it to be round. So we're going to add a thing that's just going to be the collider now. And Capsule Collider is the most common kind of collider in games. I actually don't think it makes sense for us, because we're not a tall boy, we're a cube, so I think our collider should just be a sphere, and that's the roundest we can get. Can't be any rounder than a sphere. And as it happens, it looks to me like it just is the right size right off the bat. So I am going to, we can't see it, but I'm still going to delete the mesh filter and the mesh renderer, because I never want to see this. It's just for collision purposes, so it's just a collider. And my hope... yeah, I think we can just get away with doing it this way. So now, hey look, I'm not being pushed away from it. Arguably it's more realistic if I am pushed away from it, but for me, feel trumps realism always. You always want to get your game feeling nicer at the cost of, you know, now the collision doesn't 100% match the visuals, but it's just smoother to run around. I'm immediately hitting the other problem, which is these plinths are all solid, and I kind of wish they weren't, because let's actually look. I don't think they're that high, are they? Wow. Yeah, they're not that high at all. So those shouldn't be stopping us in the tracks. There's probably ways we could modify our movement script so that we actually step up onto the plinths and off again, but I don't want to bother with that. The easiest way to fix this problem is just to go to our plinth prefab and find the cube and just turn off its collider. We could also remove it, but I'm just going to turn it off just in case if we ever did want it back. It's easier if we never removed it. While I'm at it, I believe the antique also has collision. So if we open up our antique prefab and go to its sphere, which is also its body, turn off that collider. Our weapons don't, I'm pretty sure. They have colliders, but their trigger's not solid. So that should be all for feel. Like, our traversal now should be really smooth. Yeah. I mean, enemy spawners do block you. I'm sort of in two minds about that. Turning them off would make it slightly easier to get around, but it doesn't feel wrong that they block you, because A, they're really big and physical, and B, they're an enemy thing. They're sort of, you know, they're not on your side. There's this kind of general paradigm in games, isn't there, of like, teammates shouldn't block you, but enemies can. And under that logic, this makes sense. I can't remember if I finished my sentence earlier, but I was saying that one of the changes I'm probably going to make is make guards less powerful in combat, because they're really a stealth phase thing. You know, the scary thing about guards is they might see you. Once they've seen you, right now they're the absolute boss of the game. And I feel like Swarmers, their whole job is to put pressure on you after the alarm has gone off. So it's a bit weird that the guards are so devastating. It also makes the game super harsh if you just bumble around and aggro them in the wrong situation. You can die real fast. Okay, so we got a lot done there, and that means we have time for one other little tweak I wanted to make, which is sometimes when you're running around, especially, this is one of the problems that you get less sensitive to the more you work on a game, but early on I was finding it pretty awkward to pick things up because the use range, A, is a little bit small, and B, there's no feedback on when you are or aren't in range of something. So that awkward phase where like you've tripped the alarm but the things haven't locked off yet, you're rushing around, you're trying to grab antiques, and it's really imperative that you can grab them under time pressure and know you're doing it correctly. So what I want to do is show an on-screen use prompt when you're near it, which is a thing you might want to do in a game in general. Especially, we're not going to do this, but it could be easily extended to tell you what you're going to pick up. Right now we have giant labels on the floor, so we're good on that front, and all you can ever do is pick things up. But if, for example, well, actually, our use key still knocks out guards, doesn't it? I don't use that anymore, and I'm not sure if we're going to keep that functionality. The main thing, though, is just when you're close enough to pick something up, you should be able to see that you are. So, on our canvas, the first thing we're going to do is just make this, the UI element that's going to do it. I'm going to create an empty object, and in its anchor presets here, I'm going to hold down Shift and Alt, and this is also set pivot and also set position. And then I'm going to click the bottom center one. I can't see it, I guess, because it doesn't have anything on it yet. So I'm not going to worry about that too much yet. I'm going to name this object use prompt, and I'll create an image on it. UI image. Yeah, so it is where we want it to be. I'm going to make that black and a little bit transparent. And obviously we want it to be more along that kind of line. And I am going to, you know what? Let's actually do it this way. Let me just remind myself whether we've done this before. Yeah, okay, we've done auto-sizing text before. Okay, we're going to do it again. Yeah, as a child of this, let's add a text element. Let's have it say E. That'll do. And it's going to, I'm going to make it fill the thing. So I'm Shift and Alt again and just hit this expandy one. That doesn't work very well right now because it's a fixed size, but I can say tell it to auto size, And then with auto size, it always sets a really high minimum for some reason, so I'm going to drag that way down to -17. Obviously what we want. No, I'll set it to 0. And we want to be centered, although that won't really matter most of the time. Centered horizontally, centered vertically. And then I just want to give it a little bit of a border. Let's see what looks about right. Actually quite a big border. Yeah, 9 in every direction makes it absolutely tiny. Maybe I'll be a bit more generous on the top and bottom. Yeah, that's fine. So now I want the canvas to have a reference to this. So I'm going to open our canvas behavior and just create a public game object use prompt. And to be honest, one of the reasons I'm taking the trouble to do this, even though it's kind of a polished thing, is that there's a particular sort of code pattern I want to use here that I found really useful. It took me ages to sort of stumble upon it, but it comes up all the time. And so what I want, first of all, I've written that, so let's go set that thing so I don't forget, because that's a classic Tom trick, is to create a slot for something and then forget to assign it. So drag the use prompt in there. And the player, when they are near a usable item, is going to check whether it's in range, and if it is going to tell the canvas, hey, turn on the use prompt. But we're not going to do that directly, because let me show you how that would work, because the code we're going to write is going to be pretty similar, so it's not too much of a waste to do it a way that we know we're going to change. Right now, it's a little bit difficult to show a use prompt because we don't even look for usable things until we press the use button. And obviously the use prompt needs to happen before you press the use button, otherwise it would be redundant. So all this stuff about searching through all the usables, finding out which ones are in range and finding the closest one, rather than only doing that after we press use, we want to do it all the time. So I'm going to remove this if, and I'm just going to do a quick auto format, Control KD to get rid of that indent. So now we're looking at usables all the time. And where should the button part go? It's not going to wrap around this because we want to always be searching, but here's the part where we actually use it. So we want to wrap it around here. If it's only, no, sorry, actually. It's going to be, here's a check to decide whether we found something. That's still relevant for use prompt. But after we've decided we could use something, we only want to actually use it if the button is pressed. So now here is where we will show use prompt. Let's be even more explicit. Something is in use range, but we haven't used it yet. Show use prompt. So now what I could do is references dot canvas dot use prompt set active true. Now, what's the problem with that? The problem with that is it's going to turn it on, but it'll never be turned off. So when do we ever turn it off? We could have the player turn it off, but then if we ever want anything else to turn the use prompt on, the player is going to be fighting it. Like, let's say there's 2 players, for example, or you have like a squad, and any one of your squad, if anyone in your squad is close enough to one of these things, it wants to show the use prompt. You get this problem where if all of them can turn it on, but can't turn it off, then it always stays on. If each one is trying to turn it on and then turn it off, like I can't use anything, so don't show you the use prompt, well, somebody else actually can use something and does want to show the use prompt. And whether or not who gets priority would just be a case of whose code runs first, each step. You know, each update, everything is running its update, but in what order do those updates happen? Well, we don't control that. There is a way to manually specify it, but it's really bad coding practice to rely on that. You always want your updates to be robust enough that they could run in any order and the game would still work. And so then the next logical idea is, why don't we have the canvas turn it off? So anyone can turn it on, but then every frame the canvas turns it off. Well, you essentially get the same problem, which is that who knows which happens first? It could be that if Lenny on your squad runs their update last, or runs their update first, then then every time they ask for it to be turned on, the canvas itself turns it off before we ever see it. So all that order operation stuff is real messy and nasty, and you want to be able to write code that is completely immune to it. You want to write code that just cannot go wrong in that way. And for that, I use something that I call the signal state system. Or it's really just, to put it more simply, it's just signals. And that is a public bool that I'm going to call usePrompt signal. This code pattern already exists, I assume. I've never seen the actual formal definition of it, so I'm using my own term for it. It's a signal. Anyone can set the signal, but the signal itself doesn't turn on the usePrompt. Only the canvas behavior can. So each frame, we're going to say usePrompt set active to whatever the signal is. The signal might be false or it might be true. Whatever it is, make the usePrompt reflect that. And then only after we've done that do we say usePrompt signal equals false. So this way it doesn't matter what frame it happened on. This would work even if Canvas started running its updates slower than all the rest of the game, which would be a crazy thing that can never happen, and thank God it can never happen. Even if that happened, the signal can never fail. If someone set the signal to true, it will definitely get used by the canvas. Like, whenever the canvas runs its update, the signal will be true at that point, and it will turn the usePrompt on. Then it will set the signal to false, so that it will never turn it on again unless it gets another signal to show it. And we know for sure that we'll see the actual usePrompt. So this is a pattern, I use it all the time. It's one of the most useful kind of realizations I had about code, is that this is really handy for avoiding order of operations problems. So now we need to change this bad code that would leave it on forever, and we want the usePrompt signal true. So signals, anyone is allowed to set them, but I'm not allowed to set whether or not the actual usePrompt is active, because I'm not the canvas. We could, if we wanted to be real strict. Some people have pointed out that the usePrompt right now is a public variable, so other things can set it if they want to. If we wanted to avoid that, you can make this serialized but not public, and that means it will show in the inspector, but other things can't access it. I'm not going to do that because I don't think it's important enough to be worth learning a whole new concept for, so I just wanted to mention it. Did that work? Would be a critical question we should answer at this point. Yeah, look at that. When I'm close enough to it, I get the usePrompt, and when I'm far, it goes away. And because we only have one player, we could have had the player govern that, and we wouldn't have needed the signal state system, but it's, yeah, for all the reasons I said, I think it's a worthwhile thing to teach. One quick addendum there. I called it the signal state system because in a lot of cases there's a signal variable and a state variable. In this case, we didn't need a state variable because the state is the usePrompt. Sorry, the usePrompt's, whether it's active or not, that is the state. You don't really need to understand what I just said. It's becoming my catchphrase, isn't it? Okay, there's one more thing I want to do, which is just, I think the pickup range is also just a bit short. It's set to 2 here. I'm just going to set it to 3. If we wanted to be fancy, we could pull it out of here and make it a variable we can set in the inspector. I don't really need to, because once it's right, we're not going to change it. Yeah, that feels better, doesn't it? I can grab a shotgun from over here. Let's actually put this to the test and try and do a good little heist where I want to grab a bunch of antiques. So I'm going to grab this one, and then I'm going to rapidly run over here and grab that one, and then grab this one as well, and we're going to grab that one. No. Okay, so I got 2 there, and I feel like with more awkward controls and worse collision and stuff, it would have been much harder. Man, I love these enemy types. They're so characterful. Look how slow and chunky those guys are. And actually, I kind of want to zoom in on them. Where the hell are we? Oh my god, we're all the way up here. Okay. I just want to see these chunky boys up close. Look at them. They're so satisfying. They're like these round metal pills. Using the shotgun on them feels pretty good. Let me also use the railgun on them. Using a railgun on the light guys is real wasteful because it's a high damage weapon. You can already see how much more value this adds to the different weapon types. Like, it didn't matter that much before. Basically, the railgun was just the best, and the others were kind of bad. But the railgun is still the best. But now there's a lot more reason to care about which weapon you use on which enemy. And that's often a good thing. Alright, I think that is it for this episode. So next time, do I have my plans for next time A, figured out enough that I want to tell you about them, and B, anywhere that I can see them right now? Yes, so we're going to rebalance a lot of the weapons, I think, and add some more weapons, make guards a bit less dangerous, and maybe actually build a set of levels, because right now we just have 2 levels, one super trivial and one quite messy and difficult. And what we really want to do is have, 10, maybe 20 different templates for levels that you're going to work through progressively. And we know enough about what is going to change on the level generator now. It's going to be what weapons it spawns, it's going to be how many enemy spawners, it's going to be what kinds of enemies it can spawn. So just fleshing that out with content would be a really good place to go next.